restorative practice is a massive umbrella that incorporates so many different things. It's about high challenge and high support for the families and young people that you're working with. It's about being able to do it with the families and the young people, and not to and not for, which are very easy brackets to slip into. It's about promoting change and allowing those families or young people to repair the harm that may have been caused. But it's also about asking open questions to allow the families to understand where they need to change and how they can change, which in turn means that there's a more sustainable lifestyle that's promoted through using restorative practices. And they can come in so many different forms that anybody can adopt, anybody can do.
It's really important that we equip our staff and our partners with the knowledge and the understanding and some training around how to work in this way. But we have to recognise and remember that it's about practicing, it's about owning the values that underpin this way of working and playing them through all that we do, whether we're managers, whether we're practitioners working with families, whether we're police officers, social workers, accountants, HR professionals. This is about a way of thinking about how we engage with other people, and we can learn some of the techniques, but we have to practice, we have to keep trying to do it, and we have to recognise that the people we engage with, whether they're colleagues or users of our services as a council, absolutely require our respect, our support as well as our challenge, and that all of us change as a result of the way that we learn and the way that we experience people engaging with us differently.
I think my first impressions of Family First in Wokingham was that it was something new and something very different to what's happened already. Being new to the local authority and learning my ways around the local authority and its processes, it was quite good to find out new opportunities and ways of working. So we got into Family First quite early on, and it was really good just to see people at the grassroots working with the young people and families, rather than some perhaps bureaucratic ways of accessing services that were going on previously.
Here at KCA we use restorative practice on a number of different levels. Probably at the lowest level we use it in, I guess, restorative conversations, just day to day. We've learnt to use it as a team in our teamwork. It's given us a common vocabulary, a common way of speaking and dealing with one another, but also with our service users. You know, it's given us a way of dealing with those moments, perhaps when things are not going quite right, or when somebody is struggling to engage with us, struggling to find their feet in the service. It's given us a way of really reaching out to them, engaging them, listening to what they're saying, and what really helps is they feel heard. They feel they have a voice in this process.
I think Family First is fantastic. It's a fantastic model, and I just feel we've consolidated working in partnership now. So all of the other agencies, they are like my colleagues, and it's so natural for me now to make a phone call or to send an email to one of my colleagues. I've put a couple of families forward for the Family First project, and they're really enjoying it, and it's almost empowering some of these mums. My two ladies, they're single parents. They've had problems, they've had issues, but we're now empowering them to actually get out there and believe in themselves, the fact that they can work, they can look after their families, they can be a parent. And we've also put a lot of intervention into place. So as I said to you, they can be parents now, and they can put sanctions on their own children and come to us for support, which is fantastic.
I'm not sure how well the community as a whole is aware of Family First. So I think it's something that we should perhaps be, getting those messages out more strongly. But the real impact is that the communities are feeling less crime and less antisocial behaviour as a result of the work that's being done with Family First. I'm very much aware that it's a model that not everybody understands. I think sometimes there's a concern that by taking a restorative approach, that you're somehow taking away the hard edge that comes with some of those crime and antisocial behaviour issues. But that's really not not what it's about. The law is still there, and enforcement is still a key part of the process. It's what's often referred to, or at least is referred to sometimes locally, as high challenge, high support. Families need to understand what the consequences of their actions are. Part of a restorative programme doesn't absolve you of those consequences. Policing will still enforce the law. But if we can work with families to understand the consequences better, to identify the causes of the antisocial behavioural crime they might be experiencing or involved in some way, and therefore help them not to get to the point where the law has to be enforced, then of course that's in their interest as well as that of the wider community. And really that's what's so fantastic about the restorative approach. We can intervene in a really meaningful way and prevent the necessity of moving to a stage of that hard-edge enforcement, which is still there, if we get to that stage.
Yeah, we certainly have health visitors and school nurses, but health visitors in particular have been in practice a very long time and are doing really great work, but they're working with some quite complex families, and they have been for a long time, and they've become kind of stuck with where to go next. So certainly, they were saying, why do I need to do this 3 more days training? I'm far too busy. And I said, well, okay, go on the training, see what you think, come back and let me know. And they have come back from the training very sort of re-energised, really. They've tried it and they come back and they say, yes, I can see this has made a difference. It's very much toe in the water, try it and see. And when they can see a small change, it's just a different way of looking at a problem, changing the lens, if you like, looking at it from a family strengths-based perspective rather than it's a problem, what do we do now? It's working with families, not doing unto families, not doing for the families. It's very much like when you have a small child who's fussy with their food. It's like, well, if you don't try it, you won't know. Have a little taste and see how you go. And often you find they go, oh yeah, this is great. And that's what we found with our staff. I haven't had one single member of staff who's come back and said, what is this about?
I think one of the things I would say to those who critically look at restorative practice and say maybe it's a bit soft, maybe it's a bit fluffy, I work with some very complex adults, and particularly people who perhaps wouldn't accept anything fluffy or seen as too soft or like mind games. What we have found in working with adults is that restorative practice gives us the ability to deliver a really strong challenge to those who need it in a way that doesn't feel punitive. It doesn't feel like they're a child being told off and you're the parent doing the telling off. It feels like a conversation, an open, honest conversation, adult to adult. And it tends to produce a different reaction and a different kind of behaviour than you would otherwise get.
Our initial introduction to restorative practice was a phone call from Andrea King about 2-3 years ago. She was inquiring about a young man who's in year 10 and wanted to do some work with him. Now, my initial reaction was good luck to you on that one, because we'd done a lot of work with this boy. He was a school refuser, displaying very, very challenging behaviour. And we felt that actually there was not a lot further we could go with this apart from permanently excluding him. Andrea came in and she did fantastic work with this young man. As a result, his education was improved in terms of the subjects he did and where he studied, in terms of the parents, in terms of housing, and it was wonderful to see the restorative practice results of actually working around a whole family.
I think that for Wokingham, it's very successful because it's been very bold and chosen to take a restorative approach to trying to help families who are in trouble. And that means all of the things I've already talked about. That means empowering them, doing it on a voluntary basis mainly.
Sometimes you get to the stage where professionals have tried absolutely everything else, and it's about what else can we try, what else can we do that's different, and taking a restorative approach quite often is a different approach to take. Like I said, you might have success and you might not, but from my personal view and what I have personally seen, I'm really passionate about restorative practice, restorative justice and everything that comes under that umbrella. I've seen families after many months of work take the ownership over what they need to do to promote that change within their own lives and, you know, come back a year later. And yes, not everything is perfect, but it's a massive step in comparison to where they were a year before.
The challenge, first of all, was getting the family to engage, really. Once we'd done that was great, and moved on to like a family group conference. Now, the challenges are that the family need to get together to identify all of those issues and concerns, but actually each individual, because, you know, as a family unit, it's not just one person saying these are the problems. It's all of them, you know, having their own angle on it and how things are affecting them. So, yeah, there are challenges, and, you know, there is no quick fix. Things aren't all rosy in the garden, you know, straight away. It's hard work, and families need to know that, you know. It's great to have the professionals involved and the right agencies if and when they're needed, but ultimately it is about the families finding solutions for themselves, and working together and building that strong family unit where they can support each other.
The children who come into Foundry College generally have difficulties inside and outside of the learning environment, and the restorative practices has enabled us to work with the young people and the families to address those issues, but also through Family First bringing in the multi-agency links, knowing that everybody else is working with the young person and the family in the same way and giving the same consistent message.
It would be fair to say that the outcome figures for changes for our families have just been extraordinary. They've been a lot higher than we'd expected them to be. In the first year, we identified very quickly that 77% of our families had reduced their offending very significantly, and actually the vast majority, all but one, had stopped. We thought, that's amazing. Is it because our cohort was fairly small at that stage, the first year? Will we sustain that? And what we've seen in year 2, as our figures tripled, numbers of families we work with have grown by threefold, is that 91% of our families have stopped offending, and all but 2 have stopped entirely, which is extraordinary. And some of those families, the police were with 2-3 times a week for over 2 years consistently, so it's a huge change. What's also struck us is that we've managed to engage over 2/3 of our young people in education to such an extent that they're there over 85% of the time. Their exclusions have reduced significantly. And this year that was a real challenge, because a lot of our children this year were children who were missing from education. They weren't in education at all. So the journey for them of reintegrating with just going to school, let alone being there 85% of the time, is huge. And the issues in their families that sit behind that, the level of need in their families, is really significant. So that's been a huge change for us. Lastly, I'd say the model has been predicated on a sense of shared responsibility with those families and building a sense of hope and that change is possible. And in that context, we've looked at what is the hope of that individual and that household and that family, not what's our hope as professionals. And we hadn't expected to see 41% of our families in year 2 in employment. Many of those families have never worked. For some of those families, there's 3 generations of that household that have never worked. So that change is enormous. It's a really significant transformation in terms of just the level of confidence and aspiration and hope in those households. There's a lot behind the numbers that you don't see in terms of the journey of those families.
I've always worked in the restorative practice arena. It's something that Thames Valley Police want all of our staff to work in. Family First is a fantastic project. The thing I like about it is, with all the different agencies and partners, I feel that I'm very much their colleague. It's so easy just to pick up the telephone or send an email. And the estate I work on, being a neighbourhood officer, I've put 2 families forward for the Family First project. They've both been accepted, and it's been fantastic. I'm talking about these 2 families, single mums with children. It's really empowered them to believe in themselves. They're now looking at the fact that they can maybe take a qualification or get a job and really be parents. There is a lot of intervention going on with the families, but now they feel happy that they can phone any one of my colleagues, my partner agencies, because they are on Family First, and it's a really wonderful project.
This is a long-term process. Things aren't changed overnight. People need to work together, and things could be going really, really well. We could be working towards certain goals and then nearly being there or actually achieving that. But then all of a sudden something else will happen and turn things upside down again. So it's about being consistent really and constantly being there for that family, and each individual knowing that actually, yes, blips happen, but we can get over them.
I think we have robustly debated our approach to this programme. It's not easy. These families are very vulnerable. Their needs are complex. Many of our cohort have children who are subject to child protection plans, who are at risk of being accommodated, so removed from their families. The risks in those families are high. We need to get our approach right. What we've done is brought our partnership together to create a vision, one consistent way of working that's in the best interests of our families. So we have Thames Valley Police, we have Berkshire Healthcare Foundation Trust, both their physical health services and their emotional health support services working closely with us. We've got all of our children's services partners coming together in a way that I think it's fair to say we've not done before. We've never worked consistently together with a family, both in high challenge and in high support. I think the other big change for us is starting to have further conversations with adult services about actually could this be bigger than just the children's services agenda, and that commitment to work with us to create a wider vision for Wokingham as a borough. We're already seeing quite significant changes in the way we manage our criminal justice work around integrated offender management, antisocial behaviour management, working with whole streets, whole communities where the antisocial behaviour is between a whole range of households, and we know that if we don't work with 6 households at the same time, we'll never make the changes for the children in 1 or 2 of those households. That's innovative and it's unique. I've never seen that anywhere else in the country.
All our staff have now been trained for an inset day on restorative practice approaches. We've redone our whole behaviour procedure school just to focus around restorative practice. Something we saw was that, for example, in a class, a teacher might send a student out of the classroom, but nothing was done to bridge that gap between their relationship. So the student would come back into the classroom next lesson and display the same challenge of behaviour. So what we've done is we've restructured our whole behaviour procedure approach. So now, if a teacher sends a student out of a classroom, there has to be that contact between the teacher and the student, building on what happened in that classroom, how did it make the student feel, how did the teacher feel, so that next time the student comes into the classroom, there is that relationship built. Now, I was very sceptical at first as to how this would work, but it's had amazing results within the school. As a result, our incidents of behaviour have gone down, our internal exclusions have gone down, and initially the students found it quite difficult, but they're coming around to the idea now of actually building relationships with their teachers, and they very, very much enjoy that. It's also had an impact on break and lunch times around the school, and actually seeing the relationships between the teachers and the students is incredible, and it's as a result of this restorative practice approach.
The team here at KCA committed to using restorative practice about 6 months ago, and one of the ways that we did that was to spend a day together looking at the training material, looking at how we might use it and discussing how we wanted to work together and communicate together. Out of that day, the team agreed on 5 values that they wrote themselves, we all signed up for, and we actually have those values on our office wall, and we practice them every single day, and they're to do with how we want to support one another, how we want to communicate with one another, but also how we want to challenge one another to grow and to develop and to particularly keep these skills sharp and keep using them on a day-to-day basis.
we've seen the success that we can have in the Family First programme, and focusing on that principle that I was referring to before, about the high challenge, high support. This is not about removing the hard edge that comes with criminal justice enforcement. The police are there to keep people safe by enforcing the law. But equally, we're there to try to prevent crime and disorder in the first place. And I think there are areas outside the sort of Families First agenda that could really benefit from that sort of approach. And we can see parallels already. We're exploring areas like integrated offender management, where the whole purpose of that programme is to help people who we all understand have had a criminal past because they've been to prison. What we want is to help them come out of prison in a way that means they don't go on to offend again. Now, if the learning that we can take from the Families First programme can be applied in that sort of scenario, if people are willing to take ownership for their problems, understand the underlying causes and be supported to move forward in their life and not go on and commit crime, then that's a benefit to the whole of the community. Of course, if they do go on to commit crime, then there's always the enforcement that can come from the local police service.
We're now moving on to restorative practice with the students. What we're going to do is we're going to train up about 70 or 80 of our students within the school, and we're going to be looking at them actually doing the conferencing between students. So when there's a conflict between them, when girls might fall out, they're going to get together, they're going to do the initial work with the girls, they're going to sit down with them, they're going to work through it, because we strongly feel that actually it's much better with the peers working them rather than a teacher working them. And we're looking at this over the next few weeks and months and actually build on this into registrations and into the rest of the school day.
It has potential in any number of things we do internally, around how we manage complaints, around how we manage internal difficulties and grievances between our own people when things go off the rails. And I think in any number of other service areas it has potential. We use these models a lot in children's services, far less nationally and locally in relation to vulnerable adults. So I'm really interested in where there's greater potential to explore how families can come together and work differently with each other and with us as local authority and other agencies to find solutions for vulnerable adults in the way that increasingly we are with vulnerable children, as well, I think, as continuing to roll out what we're doing on the back of the Family First programme and capture the impacts that that's having, so that all of our schools are interested and learning about these techniques and developing the practice in their schools, so that it increasingly characterises the way we work with the police, with the NHS, and with our other partners. It's hard for me to see an area of the council's business that might not be affected positively by thinking through how we use some of these principles.